We continue now at the top of Daf Peites Amud Aleph in Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 89a. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a brisa with the opinion of Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha. Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha says that with regards to the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, only the menorah itself was from the solid block of gold, the kikar zahav, and the neiros and also the utensils, they came from pure gold, but not from that same solid block of gold. And Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha learned that out from an inclusion in the pasuk. And the Gemara in the previous summit asked, why do we need an inclusion from the pasuk? There's an explicit pasuk that says that those components came from zahav tar, from pure gold. And the Gemara answered that inclusion is actually necessary for the mouth of the lamps of the menorah, since those get blackened. One might think, as the Gemara now says, v'li'avid zahav koldu, that any kind of gold is sufficient. It doesn't need to be pure gold. So kamash malon, that's what the inclusion is teaching, that as well needs to be made of pure gold. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said chatzi lug shemen letoda, half lug shemen that was used for the loaves of the carbon toda. And the Gemara says Tanya was taught in a brisa. Rabbi Akiva says ma Talmud lomar bashemen shnei po'amim. Why does the pasuk say bashemen? It says it twice. Rashi explains ma Talmud lomar bashemen shnei po'amim chalos matzos belulos bashemen urakike matzos meshuchim bashemen. So it says shemen twice, and that's by the loaves of the carbon toda. And the brisa continues, ilu lo namar ela b'shemen echad. If it only said b'shemen one time, hayisi omer, then I would have said harehu kechol ha-menachos lelug, that it should be treated like all other menachos, and one lug should be used. Achshav shekasa b'shemen, but now that it says b'shemen twice, have a riboy acha riboy, that it is an inclusion followed by an inclusion. Ve'ein riboy acha riboy ela l'mayit. When you have an inclusion with another inclusion, that is really an exclusion. And miyato ha-kosav l'chatzi lug, and therefore the pasuk is excluding and saying it is a half a lug. And the Gemara continues and asks, riboy acha riboy, is this really an inclusion following an inclusion? Chad riboy, it's really just one inclusion, because the first time it's necessary to say bashemen, and so then the second time that's the first inclusion. So ela, rather, it means as follows, ilu lo nemar bashemen kol ikar. If it would have not said bashemen at all, then hayisi omer, then I would have said hareu kechol ha-menachos lelug, it's treated like any other karban mincha, and one lug is used. Achshav shenamar bashemen, now that it says bashemen twice, and it doesn't really need to say it at all, have a riboy acha riboy, again it's an inclusion after an inclusion. Ve'ein riboy acha riboy ela l'mayit, and an inclusion after an inclusion is only as an exclusion. Miyato hakosav l'chatzi lug, and so the pasuk is excluding and saying a half a lug. Now yochel yehei chatzi lug zeh mischalek l'shloshes min, and one might think this half a lug of oil should be divided among the three types of loaves, l'chalos v'l'rekikin u'l'revicha, the chalos and the rekikin and the revicha. These are the three types of unleavened loaves that are brought with the carbon toda. But kishu omer b'shemen b'revicha, when it says the word shemen by the revicha, she'ein Talmud lomer, doesn't need to say that. So riba shemen l'revicha. So you see there's an increase of shemen by the revicha. And so haketzad, how so? How does it work? Mevi chatzi lug shemen, he brings a half a lug shemen. V'chotzeo, and he divides it chetzio l'chalos v'l'rekikin. Half of it is for the chalos and the rekikin, the loaves and the wafers. V'chetzio l'revicha, and then half of it is used for the revicha. And the brisa continues, Amar lo Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said to him, he said to Rabbi Akiva, Akiva im atamar bekol hayom kulo b'shemen. Akiva, if you're going to make inclusions all day with this word, with these words b'shemen, eini shomei alach, I'm not going to listen to you. Elachatzi lug shemen l'toda, rather it's a half a lug shemen for the toda, or revias shemen l'nazir, it's a quarter lug shemen for the nazir. V'achar asar yom shebein nida l'nida, and also the 11 days between the time of nida, halach l'moshe misinai, all of those are halacha l'moshe misinai. It's not learned from these inclusions in the pasuk that you are using. And Rashi Ksav explains, Chad ribu yehu, isn't it just one inclusion, v'shemen kama, because the first time it says shemen, itzrich, that's necessary. To tone shemen kechol menachos, that's saying that it requires oil like other menachos. And so then the Gemara said, Ala ema ilu lo nemar b'shemen kol ikar, hayisi omer, if it had not said b'shemen at all, so I would have said the lo gara, mishar menachos, I would have said it's no worse than other menachos. And yachol ye mischal lechatzi luk hashemen l'chol min v'min, milvad shebechametz, one might think we just divide the half lug of oil for all the different types of loaves except for the chametz, lo hayanosin, except for that one. Kishu omer b'shemen b'revucha, when it says b'shemen by the revucha, dechsiv hikriv al zevach hatod chalos matzos belulos b'shemen, urekike matzos meshuchim b'shemen v'soles morbeches chalos belulos b'shemen. So it says it over there. V'yad hashta havidarish b'shemen kama, v'hashta darish shemen desevid dekra. Until now, we were darshaning the earlier shemen in the pasuk. Now we're darshaning the later shemen in the pasuk. And so then Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah responded to Rabbi Akiva, Eini shom Samayalach, I'm not listening to you. Till I have a riboy achar riboy, that it's an inclusion after an inclusion. Dechad, it's trich legufe, because one of them is needed. Elachatzi lug shemen letoda, rather it's a half a lug shemen of oil, lechol haminim, for all of the different types of loaves, urevias hashemen, and also the quarter lug of shemen, lechol lachmei nazir, that's for all the loaves of nazir. V'yud alef yom shebein nida lenida, and also the 11 days between the times of nida, meaning shebein sof nida letchilas nida, this is between the end of the nida to the beginning of the nida. This is the time of the month when the woman would normally see blood, so there's those 11 days in between. After the 7 days of nida are over, nida, when the woman's a nida, shuv eina mascheles lios nida, she doesn't become a nida again. It's not the next time at yud alef yom for another 11 days. Ve'afilu imrasa dam ziva, and even if she does see blood, we assume it's dam ziva. Ve'meino roe ba'osan yud alef yom el yom echad o beis yamim mertzufin o afilu shlosha yamim, and if she sees those 11 days, 1 day, 2 days, consecutive 3 days, she'ena mertzufin, 3 days that are not consecutive, kagon yom tameh v'yom tahor, for example, 1 day of tumah, 1 day of purity, have a shomeres yom keneged yom, that's called a shomeres yom keneged yom, v'toveles liyom hamacharas, and so then she immerses the next day, v'yem shlosha yomim rasa ritzufim, and if she sees 3 days consecutive, have a zava, that's called a zava, uboy sfira shiva, and then she needs to count 7 clean days, the carbon, and she also needs to bring a carbon, avol la'achar yud alef yom, but the difference is, after those 11 days, imroe, if she does see blood, dam nida, then the halach is, that's not ziva anymore, that's dam nida, v'imroe yom rishon shomeres shisha yomim, and if she sees that first day, she watches for 6 days, v'hu v'im kol, and that day as well, v'im kol zayin rasa, uposekes lo erev, and then if even all 7 she sees blood, but then it stops in the evening, tovelas miyad, she actually could immerse immediately. Ve'inat tzricha sfira shiva, the carbon, she doesn't need like a zava, where they're counting 7 clean days with a carbon, min hatorah, that's not needed, mido raisa, she just counts the 7 days, and even if she sees blood during those 7 days as a nida, that's fine. However, we're more strict. Davul benos Yisrael hein hechmiru al atzman, but the benos Yisrael, they're strict on themselves. She'afilu roa tipas dam kechardal yosheves olav shiva nekim. Even if they see a tiny drop of blood like a mustard seed, they sit for 7 clean days. Ula'achar kamashonim kiblu alein davar zeh. After some time, they accepted upon themselves this stringency. And we will note that according to Rashi Ksav Yad, there does not seem to be any practical difference between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. They both agree in terms of the amount of oil that is used by the loaves of the carbon toda. It's just a question of whether it comes from an inclusion in the pasuk or whether it comes from a halacha l'Moshe miSinai. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Belug hayamoded, he would measure with the lug. This is talking about for all menachos. And then the Mishnah goes on to record a machlokas tanoim. According to the Tanakama, a carbon mincha requires 1 lug of oil per every isaron of flour. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov disagrees. He says even if it's a large carbon mincha with 60 isarons, still it's only going to be 1 single lug of oil for that entire mincha. It's not going to be 60 lug. According to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, it is going to be 1 lug. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabban, and the sages taught in a brisa. B'mitzora ani ksiv, by a mitzora who is poor, it is written in the pasuk isaron bolol. It says in the pasuk isaron bolol, means to say that there's an isaron mixed and a lug over there. It says velug and a lug. Limed al isaron shaton lug. This teaches that an isaron of flour in a carbon mincha requires a lug of oil. Divrei chachamim. These are the words of the chachamim. Rabbi Nechemia, Rabbi Eliezer, Omrim Rabbi Nechemia, and Rabbi Eliezer. Some have Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. They say, Afilu mincha shel shishim esronim, even if it's a carbon mincha of 60 isaron, ein lo ela lug, it only gets that 1 lug. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, lemincha v'log shaman. Again, it says lemincha v'log shaman. And the Gemara asks, Reb Nechemia of Rabbi Eliezer, now Reb Nechemia and Rabbi Eliezer, hai isaron bolol v'lug, this pasuk of isaron bolol v'lug, which again, according to the Chachamim, teaches that every isaron of flour requires a lug. Maya of delay, what do they do with that pasuk? And the Gemara answers, Ahu lagufe, that's needed for what it's teaching in the pasuk itself. To ka'amar achmana, because the pasuk is saying, Laisi chad isaron, bring 1 isaron. And that means that the poor mitzora, he brings 1 isaron for the flour of his carbon mincha. That's what that pasuk is teaching. V'idach, now the other opinion, lagufe lo tzarech, that actually is not needed. We wouldn't need the pasuk to teach what the mitzora ani brings. Midgali rachmana gavi mitzora gimel karbonos v'gimel esronos. Since the pasuk already says by mitzora 3 karbonos and 3 esronos, so hacha dechad carbon chad isaron. Here, by the poor mitzora, where it's just one carbon, so it's going to be one isaron. But v'idach, by the other opinion, Rabbi Nechemiah and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, they respond, Itzrich, no, it is necessary. Kasal kadai techamina, one might have thought, Hoel v'chos rachmana oleh la'asuya bedalus, since the Torah has mercy on him, on the poor mitzora, and says he can bring the poor kind of carbon, so ema loli boy mina klal. And some change the text from mina to mincha. One might think that the very poor mitzora doesn't need to bring a mincha at all, and that's why the pasuk is necessary. V'idach, but the other tana legamri lo eshkachan, we never find that someone who's poor is totally exempt, and so therefore again it is obvious even without the pasuk that he must bring a carbon mincha. And the Gemara continues, v'rabbanan, now the rabbanan hai lemincha v'log shemen my of delay. What do they do with the pasuk of lemincha v'log shemen? That is the pasuk that was brought by Rabbi Nechemiah and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov to teach that even a mincha of 60 isaron, it's only a lug of oil. And the Gemara answers to that, ahu, that pasuk again, according to the rabbanan, is lemisnadev mincha. That's teaching that one who donates a carbon mincha, shelo yivchos midavar haton lug, that it should not be less. It should not be less flour than the amount of flour that requires a lug. Umay nu, now how much flour is that? What's the minimum size of that mincha? Isaron, it's an isaron, because again, an isaron of flour requires a lug of oil. V'idach, but the other tanoi, meaning Rabbi Nechemiah and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, tarti shamat mina, we actually learn both things from that same pasuk. We learn, again, that even if it's 60 esronim, it only requires one lug of oil, and we also learn that the minimum amount of that carbon mincha is going to be one isaron. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Shisha lapar, 6 lug for the bull. That's talking about nisachim, the wine libation that accompanies the bull carbon. That's 6 lugin. Arba la'ayil, and then 4 lug for the ayil for the ram. And shlosha lakeves, 3 lug for the keves for the lamb. And the Gemara says, Menolan, from where do we know this? Tichsiv, because it's written in the pasuk, V'niskeihem chatzi hahin, yeh lapar. It says that for the par, it's a half a hin. And a half a hin is going to be 6 lug. As the Gemara now explains, hin tresar luge havyon. The hin is 12 lug. Tichsiv, as it's written, shemen zayisin. It says shemen zayisin. Uchsiv, and it is also written, shemen mishtras kodesh yezeh li ledorosechem. So it says that the shemen zayis is a hin, and it also uses the word zeh. And zeh begematria tresar havyon. Zeh in gematria is 12, and therefore we understand that the hin is 12 lug. And if it's going to be a chatzia hin for the par, then it comes out to be 6 lug for the par. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Shlosha umechsa lemenorah, 3.5 lug for the menorah, chatzi lug lechol ner. That's a half a lug of oil for every lamp of the menorah. The Gemara says, Menahanimili, from where do we know this? Tatanar Rabbanan, because the sages taught in a brisa, May erev ad boker, it says, from evening until morning, that's when the lamps of the menorah burn. Ten la midasa shetedo lekas v'olechas may erev ad boker, there should be the measure that it can burn from evening till morning. Davar acher, another explanation, may erev ad boker, from evening till morning. Ein lach avoda sheksheira me'erev ad boker elazu bilvad. There is no avoda that's kosher from the evening until the morning, except this one. V'shiaro chachamim, and the chachamim, they measured it as follows: chatzi lug me'orsa v'yad safar, that it's a half a lug of oil that burns from night until morning. Ika de'amri, there are those that say milmala lemata shiru, that their measuring was from the larger to the smaller. V'ika de'amri mimata lemala shiru, and there are those that say from the lower to the upper. Man da'amar mimata lemala shiru, the one who says that it's from the lower to the higher. HaTorah chasa al mamonin shal Yisrael, so it means that the Torah has mercy, so to speak, on the wealth of Klal Yisrael. Uman da'amar mimala lemata shiru, and the one who says they measured from the most to the least. Ein aniyos b'makom ashiros, because there is no poverty in the Beis HaMikdash, which is a place of wealth. And Rashi Ksav Yad explains, Ein loch avoda sheksheira, there is no avoda that's kosher mishkias hacham v'elach ad boker, from sunset and onward until morning, elazu bilvad, except for this one, which is the hadlakas neiros, the lighting of the lamps of the menorah. And then there's a machlokas, is it milmala lamata shiaru, was the measuring milmala lamata? What that means is lamala mechatzi lugi boy laisi, really more than a half a lug he should bring, avolamata lo isi, but it should not be any less than that, meaning to say that is the minimum amount. The ein aniyos b'makom ashiros, according to that, the idea is ein aniyos b'makom ashiros, we don't act like we're poor in the Beis HaMikdash, which is a place of wealth, and so therefore that should be the amount or greater. And the other opinion is milmala lamata shiru, they measured from the top to the lower, meaning kishashiru midas chatzi lug l'chol ner, when they measured that it should be a half a lug for every lamp of the menorah. Kach asu b'tchila. This is what they did. Heviu lug shalim lenasos. What they did was as follows: they brought a full lug to test. V'dola kol halayla, and it turned out that the full lug was able to be lit the entire night. It burned all night. V'gam hayom, and also the day as well. V'chazer leil sheni v'heviu shnei shlishi lug, and so then the second night they brought 2/3 of a lug. V'adayin dolak yosem meor habok. It still was able to light for longer and past the morning. V'chein asu kamalelos. They kept doing that at sheviu chatzi lug, until they brought chatzi lug. V'dola kashir halayla, and that actually worked for the amount of the night. V'lo nasu milmata lamala. They didn't test from below to above. De'ein aniyos b'makom ashiras, because there is no aniyos b'makom ashiras. That's what it means. Milmala lamata shiru. They started from the higher amount and then they kept going lower. That's ein aniyos b'makom ashiras. Uman damar milmata lamala shir. No, the other opinion is that it's milmata lamala, meaning b'tchila revius halug v'lo dolak elachatzi halayla. First they started with 1/4 of a lug, and it didn't go. It only went for half the night. Leil sheni hosifu, and then they added the second night. It said v'chein kama leilos, and they did that for several nights. Ad sheshiaru chatzi lug l'layla, until it eventually became a half a lug for that night. Avol milmala lamata lo. They didn't want to test it the other direction. Lafisha mashin denitos or benera ein lo takana, because whatever's extra then it's like a waste of oil. There's no solution. Al lishbach, it has to be poured out. Va'torah chasa al mamonim shal Yisrael. And the Torah is concerned with the wealth of Klal Yisrael. So essentially, according to Rashi Ksav Yad, the machlokas over here simply is how did they determine the amount of oil? Did they do it in a way that indicated wealth? They didn't care if there was extra that was thrown away, or did, in fact, that was a concern. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Ma'orvin nische parim b'nische elim. We can mix the nesachim of parim of bulls with the nesachim of elim of rams, and nische kavasim b'nische kavasim, also the nesachim of lambs with the nesachim of lambs, shal yachid b'shal tzibur, of the individual with the communal. And Rashi explains, Ma'orvin nische parim hai ayayin v'shem and kamer. This applies both to wine and oil. V'hachi kamer, and this is what it's saying, Ma'orvin miyayin nische parim b'yayin nische elim. We can mix the wine of the nesachim of bulls with the wine of the nesachim of rams. V'afagav de lepar isle shlosha isaron soles v'chatzi ahin yayin. Now, even though by the bull there's 3 isaron of fine flour and there's a half a hin of wine, v'shemen also a half a hin of oil. It's the same. The chatzi ahin applies to both the wine and the oil. Ula'ayil bezi isaron soles, and with regards to the ram, it's 2 isaron of fine flour. Ushlishis ahin yayin, and then it's 1/3 of a hin of wine. V'chein shemen, and the same by oil. But afal pichein, even though it seems to be different amounts, but me'orvim zeb bazeh, we can mix one with the other. Misham deshneim beli losan shava, because with both of them the mixture in terms of the proportion is the same. Delatarvayu ika shnei lugin liisaron, because for both of them it's 2 lug per isaron. Deva'ayil ksiv shlishis ahin al. By the ram it says 1/3 of a hin for the ayil. Dehainu dalid lugin, that's 4 lug. V'huadin l'shemen, and that's true by the oil as well, just like the wine. Uchsiv shnei esronim, and it's 2 isaron over there, so it's 2 isaron and it's 4 lug. Uveparim ksiv chatzi hin dehainu shisha lug, and now by the bulls it's a half a hin, which is 6 lug. V'huadin shemen, the same by the oil. Uchsiv shlosha esronim lapar, and it's 3 isaron, and so therefore it's 3 isaron of flour and it is 6 lug, compared to 2 isaron of flour and 4 lug. That's exactly the same. Essentially it's double in terms of proportion. Dehainu beis lugin lisaron, it's 2 lug per isaron. V'kevon dibli losan shava, since the mixture is the same in terms of the ratio, mishamachim ma'orvin nische, and for this reason we can mix. Umarvin nami nische kevasim b'nische kevasim, we can also mix the libation of the lamb with the libation of the lamb. Kagon b'nische musaf, for example, by the libations of musaf. Misham de tarvayu bli losan raka, because both of those, it's a runny, it's a thin mixture. Devishnein yesh gimel lugan shemen lisaron. For both of those, it's 3 lug of oil per isaron. Dechsiv isaron lakevis, it says 1 isaron for the kevis. Uchsiv revius hahin lakevis yoyin dehainu gimel lugan. It also says it's 1/4 of a hin for the kevis in terms of wine. That's 3 lug. V'chein shemen, and again, that's the same by the oil. V'chein nami me'or v'nische kevasim shel yochid b'nische kevasim shel tzibur. We can also mix the nische kevasim of the individual with the nische kevasim of the communal. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Peites Amid Beis.